During a live broadcast watched by millions of Americans on the nation's leading news channel, Senator Bernie Sanders unexpectedly launched a fierce attack, directly targeting President Donald Trump. The sharp criticism seemed poised to give Sanders a political advantage, but just hours later, the situation completely reversed. President Trump appeared in a surprise, powerful, and highly strategic speech. Not only did he comprehensively refute Sanders' accusations, but he also revealed a series of shocking information that sent shockwaves across the nation. What Trump disclosed next completely shifted Sanders' standing, not only on television screens, but also in the eyes of the public and the political sphere. What was expected to be a routine policy discussion quickly turned into a media earthquake, with the epicenter being Bernie Sanders' bold statements that fateful morning. As the cameras rolled and millions watched, the host asked Sanders about his stance on Trump's new executive order, aimed at terminating a long-term funding program linked to nonprofit organizations suspected of corruption. Sanders smirked, his eyes sharp, leaning forward and saying, "Donald Trump is the embodiment of a plutocracy, a president who sells out America to billionaires and abandons the working class. He is unfit to lead this country." Murmurs erupted in the studio, and the host was stunned. "I'm saying exactly what I think," Sanders emphasized, his voice resolute. "The American people deserve a leader who truly fights for justice, not someone pretending to combat corruption while being a product of it." Within seconds, social media exploded. Clips were shared everywhere online, and Sanders' team was initially confident. But then they noticed something unusual. The comments weren't supportive. As expected, they were filled with anger, intense anger. Meanwhile, the White House remained completely silent, not a single response. But hours later, something was brewing, and when Trump broke the silence, it shook Sanders to his core. A surprise press conference at the White House was announced. No one knew the content. Cameras from every major news outlet flooded the briefing room, and the atmosphere was tense. Then the door opened. President Donald J. Trump walked in, calm and composed, in a navy suit and his signature red tie. He didn't appear angry. He looked determined. Trump stepped to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and paused. He looked directly into the camera and said, "I wasn't going to respond, but when someone stands before the nation on television and calls me a traitor, I have a duty to show the American people the truth." He held up a thick stack of documents, looking official and carefully sealed. The reporters buzzed. Trump continued, "Our records of contracts worth over $85 million funneled into fake nonprofit organizations, all linked to close donors of Senator Bernie Sanders." Gasps echoed, and journalists scrambled to take notes. Trump didn't stop. "I fight for the forgotten Americans. I endure criticism every day. But when you accuse me of corruption while hiding this," he raised the documents high, "you're insulting the very people I swore to protect." He looked straight into the camera. "Senator Sanders, you picked the wrong day." At a political event in Burlington, Vermont, Sanders' team was in disarray. His phone rang incessantly, and the headlines were brutal. Trump drops shocking evidence on Sanders. Corruption allegations rock Sanders' reputation. Sanders' insults backfire. A young aide whispered, "Sir, shall we issue a statement?" Sanders looked exhausted, his eyes pensive. He hadn't expected Trump to hit back so fiercely, especially with concrete evidence. "No statement yet," he replied curtly. But the cracks were already showing. Across the country, in Washington, D.C., Trump sat with Barron and Melania, quietly watching the public's reaction on the screen. "I didn't want to take it this far," he whispered, "but I had to stand up for the truth." Barron looked up at his father. "You did the right thing, Dad." Trump nodded, his gaze thoughtful. But the story wasn't over. The next 21 hours would change everything, not just for Bernie Sanders, but for Trump and the nation. It was only the beginning. Every major news network interrupted regular programming to report what Trump revealed. It wasn't just a political jab, it was a bombshell. Documents, invoices, names, and worst of all for Sanders, specific dates that proved Sanders had quietly approved transactions, benefiting fake nonprofit organizations run by longtime donors while publicly preaching about fighting for social justice. In Burlington, Vermont, Sanders' wife, Jane Amira, sat alone in front of the TV. Watching the news, she clutched her rosary beads, whispering, "God, please help my husband." Meanwhile, Trump dominated every platform. Truth crushes. Sanders, Trump strikes back, corruption exposed. What amplified it all wasn't just the evidence, but how Trump spoke calm, direct, almost fatherly. I've made mistakes, Trump admitted, but what I've never done is steal from the American people and call it morality. The nation didn't just watch, they felt it. Veterans called into radio shows. Voice is choked with emotion. Single. Mothers sent thank you videos. This was no longer politics. This was truth. And Bernie Sanders was about to face the consequences. Trump's phone buzzed. Sir, it's Senator Sanders. He wants to talk privately. Trump's aide looked nervous. Will you take the call? Trump paused, poured a glass of water, and gazed out at the quiet D.C. streets. Finally, he picked up the phone, his voice. Steady. Senator Sanders. A pause, then a strained voice came through. Mr. President, I didn't expect you to go this far. Trump didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He simply said, I didn't go far. Bernie, I just told the truth. You went too far when you lied on national television. Sanders stammered. You may have ruined me. Trump replied, you ruined yourself when you mocked the American people, calling someone fighting for them a fraud. He hung up. No yelling, no threats, just silence. Sanders sat in his darkened Burlington office, hands trembling. In that moment, he wasn't a senator. He was just a man realizing his terrible mistake and feeling its weight. Dawn broke like a flood, carrying America's tears. Truck drivers posted videos crying in their cabs. A teacher in Ohio held up her phone in class, telling her students, this is what honesty looks like. A wheelchair-bound veteran in Pennsylvania saluted the TV screen. Something profound had stirred the nation's heart. Meanwhile, Sanders canceled all scheduled appearances. His social media accounts went silent. Even his progressive allies began to distance themselves. But Trump didn't celebrate. That morning, he visited a children's hospital in D.C. without inviting the press. A nurse secretly filmed him holding the hand of a young cancer patient, whispering, you're stronger than any senator or president I've ever met. The video spread like wildfire within hours, and as the sun rose over Washington, D.C., one truth became clear. The man who was mocked didn't fall. He stood tall not for himself, but for the people. In a small town in Michigan, a retired miner named Walter sat at his kitchen table. He hadn't cried in years, not even when he lost his job or his wife passed away. But after Trump's speech, he wept. Walter took an old envelope and began writing, Dear Mr. President, I'm just a forgotten man. But last night you reminded me that we still matter. When Senator Sanders mocked you, you didn't respond with hate. You responded with truth. Thank you for fighting for us. His hand trembled as he sealed the envelope. His 11-year-old grandson looked at him, surprised. Why are you crying, Grandpa? Walter wiped his tears. Because the man in the White House, he still remembers people. Like me, he mailed the letter. It reached Trump just hours later, and what Trump did with it moved the nation deeply. Major news outlets like CNN tried to spin the narrative. Sanders' allies rushed to claim he was misunderstood, but it was too late. The American people had seen the truth with their own eyes. Trump didn't need to shout or berate. He simply opened a stack of documents and presented the truth calmly, with strength. In contrast, Sanders' team frantically deleted social media posts, removed videos, and scrubbed comments. But screenshots don't disappear. Every post from Trump that morning was flooded with support. Thank you, President Trump. I had lost hope. I cried when I saw you hold that sick child's hand. You care more than they do. You didn't just expose Sanders, you gave us courage. At a small diner in rural Wisconsin, the black women sat watching the news. One leaned forward, whispering, I never voted for him. But after yesterday, I just might. A shift was happening, not political, but emotional. In Ohio, a 9-year-old boy named Ethan watched Trump's speech with his father, a former Marine. That night, Ethan hugged a folded American flag, a keepsake from his uncle's funeral, as he went to bed. The next morning at the breakfast table, he told his father, I want to send this flag to President Trump. He's not fake like that guy on TV. He's real. His father choked up. That same morning, Ethan's drawing of Trump standing tall, with a heart on his chest, went viral after his mother posted it online with the caption, My son says, this is what a president looks like. Thank you, Trump, for standing tall when others lie. By noon, the White House reached out to Ethan's family. By evening, the boy's flag was on its way to Washington. In his next speech, Trump held up the flag without saying a word. The crowd erupted, and Sanders, watching on a TV screen in a Burlington, Vermont hotel, began to realize he hadn't just lost the debate, he had lost the nation's trust. In the Oval Office, Trump sat with his closest advisors. He gently placed a new stack of documents on the table, labeled authorized personnel only. Advisor Stephen Miller leaned forward, concerned. "Are you sure, Mr. President? Releasing this?" Trump raised a hand to stop him. "The people deserve to know. Not tomorrow, today." Inside the stack of documents were financial disclosures, bank transfers, and emails, clear evidence that a community health initiative once championed by Sanders was actually a money laundering hub. Millions of dollars in taxpayer money had vanished, some funneled to Sanders' campaign donors. This was no longer about insults. This was betrayal. Trump stood up, saying softly, "We fight corruption not with anger, but with light, and we're about to flip the switch." Outside the White House gates, people had gathered waving flags, holding signs, and waiting for a feeling they hadn't felt in years: hope. In Montpelier, Vermont, a young woman named Sarah sat alone in her apartment. She had once believed in Sanders, had interned in his office, typed reports, and seen the documents. She knew the truth, but now, as Trump exposed what she thought would stay hidden forever, guilt crashed over her like a wave. She picked up her phone, typing a short message: "Dear President Trump, you don't know me, but I worked for Senator Sanders. What you said is true. I saw it. I have documents. I'll testify if needed. I just want to do the right thing." She hit send, hands trembling. 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "We're listening. Thank you. You're brave." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, not from fear, but from relief. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was betraying her country. She felt free. Trump stepped onto the south lawn of the White House, standing before a simple podium with the American flag behind him. No grandiose music, no dramatic lighting, just stillness. He began, his voice gentle. "I wasn't going to speak tonight, but then I got a letter from a minor and a drawing from a little boy. I got a message from a young woman who worked for Sanders." He held up Walter's letter, his gaze steady. "This isn't about politics. This is about truth." Trump continued, "When I was mocked on live television, I didn't flinch because I know who I am. But when someone mocks the truth, mocks the American people, that's when we have to stand up." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "We're not perfect, but we're good, and I'll never stop fighting for the good people of this country." Viewers at home wept. Sanders, in a darkened hotel room in Burlington, Vermont, bowed his head, hands covering his face. Deep down, he knew the truth had caught up with him. Just minutes after Trump's speech ended, clips flooded every platform. But one moment stood out above all: not Trump holding Athens' flag, not the documents. It was when he paused, looked at the crowd, and said with profound sincerity, "This country doesn't need more polished politicians. It needs people who tell the truth. And if telling the truth makes you hate me, so be it. But I'll still fight for you." That line was replayed millions of times across platforms. Even those who had never voted for Trump whispered, "That's real." A young progressive podcaster broke down crying during a live stream, whispering, "I never thought I'd say this, but I believe him." Meanwhile, in a rideshare car in Montpelier, Sanders silently watched the news. The driver, a middle-aged father of 4, turned back and said quietly, "Sir, you shouldn't have said those things." Sanders didn't respond because there were no excuses left. The country was changing not out of anger, but through awakening. In the White House residence, Melania Trump sat alone, rewatching her husband's speech. She wasn't one to cry easily, but tonight, tears fell because she saw something no headline could capture. She saw her husband hurt, but still strong, attacked, but still standing. She picked up her phone and texted him, "You spoke like a father, a man, and I'm proud of you." Trump, in the West Wing, read the message in silence. Then he looked at the corner of his desk, where Athens' folded flag sat next to Walter's letter. He whispered, "This is why we fight." Outside the White House, the crowd grew larger. They weren't chanting Trump's name. They were chanting, "Truth, truth, truth." For the first time in years, the air in D.C. felt clean. Sanders locked himself in his hotel room for hours. His team was in chaos. Donors pulled out. Even allies in the progressive movement stopped answering calls. But one email broke him. Subject, "My son used to admire you." From Laura H. "He's only 12. We used to watch you together." He thought you were brave. But after what you said about President Trump, he cried. He said, you hurt someone who didn't hurt you. He tore your picture off his wall. Sanders dropped his phone. He looked in the hotel mirror and, for the first time in his career, felt shame not for losing, but for forgetting what this work truly meant. And he didn't yet know things were about to get worse. At a small veterans hospital in Pennsylvania, an elderly veteran named Charles lay in his bed, his strength fading. His daughter, Emily, held his hand as they watched Trump's speech. Replay on the small TV in the corner. Charles' breathing was faint, but when Trump said, "This isn't about me, this is about America's soul," a tear rolled down his cheek. He whispered, almost inaudibly, "That man, he gets it." Emily, eyes wet, asked, "Dad, should I turn off the TV?" Charles shook his head slowly. "Leave it. I want that to be the last thing I hear." Those were his final words. Minutes later, he passed. Emily shared the story online. The post exploded, shared millions of times. "My dad died with Trump's speech in his ears. He was proud again. Thank you, Mr. President." Trump read the story in quiet, private reflection, saying only to his staff, "We fight for people like Charles to the end." Bernie Sanders' silence became deafening. Journalists began digging deeper. Trump's documents had sparked a powerful wave. The Washington Sentinel published a bombshell report, exclusive. Sanders' ties to shady nonprofit funds span 8 years. Newscasts hesitated as they read the details: emails, payments, kickbacks, even contracts signed while Sanders publicly decried greedy corporations. Across the country, former Sanders supporters fell silent. Some spoke out, shocked and betrayed. A group of young people in Burlington, Vermont, who had campaigned for him, posted a heartbreaking video. "We believed in you, but now you're the lie we warned everyone about." At the White House, Trump didn't gloat. He didn't post victory laps online. He simply walked into the press room, said one sentence, "The truth speaks for itself," and then left. Now, the American people were speaking louder, and Sanders seemed to vanish. Sarah, the young intern who had messaged Trump days earlier, hadn't expected the follow-up call. "Hello, is this Sarah?" "Yes." "Who's this?" "This is the president's office. The president wants to meet you." Sarah was stunned. That afternoon, she was flown to D.C. not a media stunt, not for attention, but something genuine. Trump met her in a private room, no cameras, no speechwriters, just him, Melania, and Sarah. Sarah, trembling, explained the documents she had, ones that could end Sanders' career. Trump didn't interrupt. When she finished, he looked at her and said gently, "You just did something most senators have never done for this country. Thank you for your courage." Sarah burst into tears. So did Melania. As she passed the American flag in the hallway, Sarah whispered, "This is what justice feels like." Outside, the crowd grew larger, waving flags, singing the national anthem, holding signs that read, "Truth Matters." In a dimly lit room in Montpelier, Vermont, Sanders slumped on a sofa.